Um, well, good morning, everybody. Good morning. So happy to see you. Gosh, seeing those pictures of last Sunday, it was like in my mind, I was like, was that just last Sunday? It was a long time ago. But I really wanted to thank all of you. There's a lot less people here this Sunday, but for all of you who were there last Sunday, I wanted to thank you for being there and sharing so much of your love and support. It was really quite overwhelming. I felt so embarrassed to be receiving more flowers and gifts on stage when you guys just did that before our sabbatical. But we really felt a lot of love. And more than that, I really hope that you could feel that you were also being celebrated, as this is it might be our 10 years of being here, but it's a 10-year journey that we've been on with all of you. And some of you have been on it for the whole 10 years, and some of you have joined in the last year or so, or even the last couple of weeks. But we wanted to celebrate where we are together and what we've created, and even more so where we are going next and what we are creating together. So I will say that I really shocked me. I was like, that was 1 week ago, because this has been a very long week for me. I felt like so many different things came, not necessarily together, I would say more like came apart in my life in the last week in different ways. I have one child who shall remain nameless, who continues to challenge me in many new ways. She surprises me every day. And I found myself thinking a number of times this week, like, haven't we been, I thought we were done with this, or aren't we over this by now, or am I doing something wrong? And but I will say she's not the only child who challenged me this week. I happen to be surrounded by children all the time. I have multiple children of my own. I run a school, and I found, and interestingly, in my school, I'm not a teacher. We don't have teachers. We have guides, and guides don't teach. We don't tell people what to do. We empower them to make their own rules and their own decisions. And we have some very strict rules for ourselves, and one is to not nag or be sarcastic. Like, it's to always receive what they have with compassion and then offer like choices and questions. And I feel like I've really trained myself over the last 4 years to do that. And I can say confidently, I was sarcastic with my class at least 5 times this week. And I only have school 3 days a week. And I was like, what? Like, I thought that I was past this. I thought I was better at this. Like, what is going on? It sounds like a small thing. I was sarcastic, but it's such a big thing in our school that we are completely genuine with our children, with our young heroes. And I have other children who shall remain nameless, who also challenged me this week. I didn't make dinner for them one night. I was so upset. There's another story behind that. You can ask me later if you want, but they're old enough to make it for themselves. There we go. Thank you. But I felt like it just kept happening. Something like it wasn't like I had even time to digest one thing that happened before I would find myself challenged by somebody else or another situation. And I felt like I was at my very kind of limit of patience. And I consider myself a very patient person. Not as patient as my mom. My mom is like the pinnacle of patience. But I feel like I had none of it. And it only took one snarky comment from somebody in my class, or one more thing for one of my children to destroy, where I was like, why? What's wrong with you and what's wrong with me? And before I knew it, I was feeling very incompetent, feeling like I'm definitely not doing things the way that I should be doing them. And then finding myself in a negative spiral of self-talk, which I am not a negative person. I think I'm generally very upbeat, level-headed, positive. It's very unusual for me. But yet there I was. So at this point, I think I was in like Wednesday or Thursday, halfway through my week, and I was like, I am not going to survive the rest of the week like this. It can only get, like, if I don't change something, it's only going to get worse from here. So in like desperation, I Googled, give me a quote for when you feel like a failure. And of course, now when you Google something, AI has the first response. But even that, AI said something like, when you're a failure, it's only an opportunity to get better at something that you're bad at, or something like, it was something like that. Like, and I was like, okay, I can grab onto that something. I need something that's not from me. I can't think of something positive that I believe right now. So I need something else. And even just AI's poor attempt to make me feel better was something. I was like, okay, it's an opportunity. Failure is an opportunity to get better at something. And then I started to dig into it throughout the rest of the week. I started to look at Bible quotes. I started to research, what did your parents say about this? Because this isn't the first time I feel like a failure, and I'm certainly not the only one who occasionally feels like a failure. And so I'm going to share a few of the quotes that I found. I found quite a few. Turn it on. There we go. James 1, verses 2 through 4. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work, so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. It's one thing to read this quote when you're in a good place or a good mood, and it's another thing to read it when you're in really negative place. Pure joy? What? I had to sit with that for a while. But I could really accept that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. And this is an interesting phrase. Let perseverance finish its work. When I hear that, what I think is when you persevere to the end, right? Don't try a little bit and then give up. If perseverance can finish its work, you can become mature and complete. You will have graduated to a new level, not lacking anything. But I found that also kind of fit in with the AI definition, right? When you have a trial, when you have a difficulty, when you meet a challenge that maybe you're not up for yet, it doesn't mean that you won't get over it eventually. I do feel like there are times when we can persevere and we overcome and we win. And then there are times when it's like you're riding a bike up a hill and you're like, I can't actually make it this time. That's a really high hill. But there's a difference between just going back and never trying again, and then instead recognizing, I need to work out some more. I need to do some more leg exercises to build up my muscles. I need to maybe get better equipment on my bike so that next time I can get over it. I think that's the difference. There's a failure when we try something and we fail and that's not for me. I can't do that. Or there's a difference when we try something and we don't succeed but then we learn that there's a lesson from it. There's something that we can get from that experience that we can use to better ourselves. This is a really nice quote from our true mother, Mrs. Moon. No matter who you are, you will not experience only sweetness and joy on the path to the kingdom of heaven. No matter who you are. Going through spiritual struggle is, in fact, a most precious blessing. Through it, you can feel the grace of God. Only when you pass those tests can you be born anew as a true human being. The fruit of perseverance will grow and ripen within you, and one day will become the source of your deepest pride. I hear people affirming this quote, and what I get from that is that we do understand this. I think that most of us, hopefully all of us, can look back on our life and think of a time that was very challenging, and it maybe didn't feel good while we were in it, but now, when we look back, we could say that I'm a better person because of what I overcame during that time, or I'm a better person because of what I learned, or of how I grew my heart through these challenges. Do we have those experiences? Okay. I think the challenge is when we're in the moment to take that experience and apply it and believe that it applies now, right? But that's why I felt like it's so important for when I'm in these moments to not just be thinking about how I'm struggling and why this is hard, but to look outside of myself. It was so beneficial for me to just accept I need some help from somebody other than my own brain, which is not helpful right now. And then go to AI, go to God, go to true parents, right? So that we can be reminded that the struggle is not everything. These quotes kind of remind me of a self-help book I read many years ago. I actually don't remember what it was. I think it was a Malcolm Gladwell book. But the big concept I got from this book was that we do grow ourselves by going through challenges. If you're somebody who hasn't been challenged very much in your life, think of it in levels. You have no challenges in your life. You're a level 1 person in terms of challenges, right? What if you face a level 3 challenge? It's going to feel really big. It might seem insurmountable. If you have never had to overcome a challenge before, what do I do with that? However, right, after maybe trying a few times, making it over, then you realize, oh, that's how I get over that hill. That's how I get through this challenge. And then when you look back, you're like, well, I could probably do that again if I had to, right? Then you become a level 3 person. But let's say you're a level 8 person, you've already been over that level 3 bump so many times. You've been over level 5 bumps, 7 bumps, 8 bumps. Then if you come across another level 3 bump, it's you hardly notice it. It's like a little speed bump. I know for myself that when I face a challenge that feels really big, I don't want to deal with it. But instead of trying to run away from it or just avoid it, I'm working on seeing it as an opportunity to grow something in myself that has room for growth. So rather than just, I don't want to do this, so this shouldn't be happening to me, right? It's more of taking a perspective of there's something in me that still has room for growth. I was thinking in terms of the school, I felt like I've been doing so well for 3.5 years of using the right kind of terminology with my learners and being respectful, and I kind of shocked myself with my snarkiness and my sarcasm this week. But so part of me was like, well, that's wrong. What's wrong with me that I'm doing this? Instead, I'm trying to flip it to, I must be able to have a bigger heart that I'm not at yet. Or I must be able to have a more wholesome perspective on the people in my class that I haven't developed yet. And actually, having a bigger heart, developing a more wholesome perspective would be awesome, wouldn't it? Like, that's actually a wonderful opportunity that if I wasn't facing this challenge right now, I wouldn't even consider really trying for, because I feel like I already had it. So instead, I'm trying to switch it to, well, if I didn't have this challenge, then I would just stay the same. I don't want to forever be the same person. So I'm really trying to move into this perspective of failure is not the end, especially if we don't allow it to be. And a big part of not living in our failure is taking God's perspective. This is another quote from Psalms. "The Lord makes firm the steps of the one who delights in him. Though he may stumble, he will not fall, for the Lord upholds him with his hand." I feel like all of these quotes really hit differently depending on whether you're in the middle of a struggle or not. And in the middle of a struggle, I'm like, I realize stumbling doesn't sound bad if you're just looking at the verse, right? Looking at the words. But have you actually stumbled? And like in the middle of a stumble, doesn't your heart jump into your throat? You don't know what's going to happen next. I did that 2 days ago. I was carrying something in my hands from the shed up into the cafe, and I tripped on the steps, and I was like carrying one of these big marble vases. And I was like, my whole world like freaked out and my life flashed before my eyes. I was like, I'm gonna break this vase. So like a stumble doesn't sound like much in words, but a stumble can feel very scary. It can feel like a failure while it's happening. So I like what this is saying. God isn't promising us that we aren't going to stumble, or that we aren't going to be scared, or we're not going to feel like a failure when we're in the middle of a stumble. And if we don't look to God, or if we get caught up in our stumble and we fall on the ground and we stay there, we could say, well, that's a fall or that's a failure. But I really feel like that if we still strive to take God's perspective, we strive to find what is the lesson in this challenge, or we look inward and say, well, what in me is being challenged? Is it my heart is like a little too cold right now? Is my vision only looking at my own feet and what's around me? What is it that I can grow through this challenge? So I level up, right? So that this challenge doesn't seem like the end of the world, but instead is a speed bump. With God's perspective, we don't have to fall. Here's another one. Proverbs. "For though the righteous fall 7 times, they rise again." And we've all heard quotes like this, right? If at first you don't succeed, try again. Thomas Edison's, "I haven't failed, I've only found 10,000 ways that don't work." But again, it's like when you're in that moment, when you feel like you've fallen down 7 times, are you willing to get up again? I find that in my own, if I'm just searching in myself or in my own feelings, I usually don't find that motivation. I have to go outside of myself. I have to go to God, or I have to remind myself of my purpose. Why am I doing this? Who am I doing this for? That's what gives us the strength to rise again. I also felt really grateful for our experience in the last few weeks of looking for a new property, because I felt like that God gave me such a wonderful example of what this means. You know, when Pastor Mike and I first looked at this property, I wasn't even thinking about looking for a new church property, but when I saw it, I was like, whoa, so many things are possible with this for our future, for our young people, income potential, all these things. I got very excited about it. And as you know, at this point, we've decided not to pursue it. And from one perspective, that could look like a failure. We failed to purchase this building. But for me, I don't see it that way at all. I found that for Mike and I, it was such a learning experience, a growing experience. We were able to grow our vision for what we want for the future of our community. And it's not happening in this timeline, but I feel like I'm very able to accept that this was not the right timing. And God was using it to like move us another step closer to where he wants us to go. And God is preparing something for us. And this was just like a little window. Like, hey, look, I want to do this for you. Now get yourself ready. And I feel like it was God showing me, like, I'm doing this for you all the time in all of your life and all of your situations. I've got your back. I'm always looking out for you. And I'm always taking you towards your purpose. My challenge is if I can kind of copy and paste that, like apply that amazing growth and understanding that I learned through this not church buying experience, and put it into the other challenges that I have. Because God doesn't change, right? God's intention doesn't change. The way he works in our life doesn't change. God's truth doesn't change. It's just me and my emotions and the way that I'm looking at the challenges in my life that changes. So being able to trust that God is the same in all situations is more the challenge for me. That he is there in the relationship with my child who shall not be named. And that there is, actually there's more love. There's better things on the other side of this challenge. I don't want to be going through this challenge. I just wish that this person wouldn't do those things. Like, that's kind of my wish. But if I can like copy and paste this experience with a church building onto my relationship with my child, then I can believe like there's actually more in store for us through these challenges. Sure, it'd be easier if they didn't push my buttons, if I didn't have to like replace things that were broken, if I didn't have to sit down and have these conversations with her. But I'm trying to switch it to like, if I bring God into this, if I humble myself, if I can work through these things with her, there's actually, like, we will have a better relationship on the other side of this than if she hadn't been challenging me and if I hadn't grown my heart. Right? There's something better in store for us. That me growing through my challenges will actually bring me to a better place if I allow myself to take it that way. If I don't see failure as final. I think one of the biggest examples from the Bible is Jesus' death on the cross. That, I think, for the disciples at that time, when Jesus had to go to the cross and Jesus died, in that moment, I'm sure all of, like, Peter ran away, right? Like, failure. absolute, utter disappointment and failure. And even though that wasn't what Jesus wanted to do originally, he still had the heart of, like, how can I give my very best in this situation, and even if that means giving my life? I want to give the very best that I have. And it was like an offering that God could use to then transform the hearts of his disciples, who became the strongest advocates, who transformed all of history and Christianity. So you could say that was a failure. That wasn't, Jesus couldn't persevere through that and come out on the other side and save the world as was the original plan. Sometimes we do fail the original plan, but it doesn't mean that God still can't take that and use it to bring something good. So it's just kind of a side note. It was interesting when I was reading about lessons on failure. I found an article by a man who I believe he was like the head of a college, a university in Louisiana or something like that. And he was sharing his lessons on failure and leadership. And there was a lot of I felt really wise words in there. But something that I thought was so interesting and that really resonates with me right now, he was saying that something that many leaders fail to do is to move on after 10 years. And I was like, oh, we just had our 10-year anniversary. But what he was saying was that, a leader can make a lot of changes and be very visionary and do a lot in 10 years. But it shouldn't take them more than 10 years to do what they originally set out to do. And usually after 10 years, a leader kind of only gets in their own way. They become a bottleneck, which is exactly what Mike and I have been saying. And I thought that was very interesting because we've also felt like I'm not saying right now that now's the time we're going to step down now or anything like that. But I do feel like it's time to shift into a new, a different type of leadership, different mode. We don't want to be focusing on accomplishing the same things we've been accomplishing for the last 10 years. We want to be focusing on newer challenges, and we want to empower other people to have their chance for leadership, to do the things that maybe we didn't even think about doing. And he said, after 10 years, if you're still doing the same things, usually you start to become your own stumbling blocks, and we don't want to become our own stumbling blocks. So it's really just a side note to the message, but in my research about failure, I was assured that we are moving in a good direction. Mike and I are already planning to step out of our own way and not be the bottleneck. And we really want to empower all of you, people who have passions, to follow your callings and to make a difference in this community and embrace the failures as they come and grow through them. And really want to thank you for your support and your generosity for all these 10 years, because it hasn't been without its challenges, and it's not the first time, my experience in feeling like I'm failing this week is not the first time that we felt like Mike and I have maybe failed in the last 10 years, and it won't be the last time. But we're grateful for the journey that we're walking on together with all of you. So, just wanted to share that today. Thank you so much. Please join me in prayer. Heavenly Parent, good morning. Thank you so much for walking with us on this journey of life and sitting with us in our challenges and always being there for us. Many times we forget to open up our hearts and minds to you and what you are wanting to show and guide us with. But I pray that we can learn through as we go through our challenges, and then we look back and we realize how much we grew, or what you were showing us, and how much you were loving us even in our difficulties. I pray that we can be reminded as we go further into our life and as we go through greater difficulties that you are still the same and your love is still there for us, and you are upholding us with your hand and always bringing us closer to you and your love and to our purpose. I pray that we can be humble to that, and that we can, rather than resisting the difficulties in our life, we can instead find the parts of our hearts that might need to grow through those challenges. And we just welcome you into our daily lives, not only our victories, but our difficulties. And I offer this prayer in my name, like Adonia Hendrick, Blessed Central Family. Amen. And adieu. Okay, thank you so much.